Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. So it's turning out to be a very interesting couple of days. What I want to address in this little short video is I want to talk obviously about the incident between Daniel Haqiqaju and Imam Suhaib Webb that took place in Houston, but I want to talk about it from the point of view that I actually want to make it not so much axiomatic about Daniel, even though I'm really quite upset at him. And I find not only what he has done in terms of his consistent badgering and harassing and slandering of Imam Suhaib, but I want it to be understood that one, he's not the only target. Obviously, he's done this with like Omar Suleiman, even with Sheikh Joe Bradford and others. And what we have amongst us now is an attitude of people who are claiming, one, as he said, I am jahil, I'm not a sheikh, and so he's feigning a kind of humility, at the same while claiming to be like a sort of da'i or a da'iyat, somebody calling people to Islam, but his focus really is exclusively to rat people out, so to speak. And so I think that's probably a good place to start with one of the issues that I have with him and the time that we live in of the social media personality that has taken such center stage amongst our community. And so the consequence of this is that it has essentially left or it leaves young Muslims in particular with the impression that a person that is an imam or a person that is a scholar is by default untrustworthy until they can be proven in a court of law, so to speak, of their trustworthiness. And of course, that court of law is, Daniel's YouTube channel or his Twitter account, in which he will essentially bring people almost like a kind of tribunal before him to have to account for what they did, and to essentially testify before him as if we must go before some sort of Congress of Daniel Haqiqaju. And so Imam Suhaib himself just recently released a video in which he talked about some of his own mistakes that he made, and that if he had them to do over, he wouldn't do. And that while that's very courageous to do, what I don't like about that is, one, if it was such an enormous issue when Imam Suhaib did that back in, I think, 2017, then why isn't that there were more people amongst the community of imams that were not incensed or outraged, or those of us that were close to him didn't speak to him? Now, that being said, there were some of us that were like, well, I certainly wouldn't have done that, myself. I don't think I would go and do an interview with a magazine like that, even, as he said, like at that moment, apparently they had desisted from posting those kinds of pictures, but undoubtedly it was a magazine that has an incredibly immoral history to it. And so I think if it were put in the right way, that Imam Suhaib would have more than been open to counsel and criticism on that. And I think, as he said, wanting to try to reach the masses, seeing that perhaps as an opportunity, despite the magazine's history, that it was an opportunity to speak to a broader audience. But nonetheless, I think that there were certainly legitimate grounds to criticize that. What I don't like is Daniel, one, going and drumming up things. It is now halfway through 2023, almost into 2024. This is an incident that took place in 2017. And so to have to go back and drum these things up and to bring them out as a form of tribunal or a form of humiliation is incredibly mean-spirited. And again, his terminology, the simp imams. I had to ask my wife. I didn't even know what that term means anymore. Sympathetic or something, right? Simp imams or compassionate imams, and essentially saying that, well, if a person doesn't take his particular tract on an issue, then that means that they are, pro LGBTQ or some other immoral issue. And so my real concern is we already have a generation of Muslims that are highly disenfranchised with Islam, that are confused about their Islam, that they have increasingly less and less attendance of not only the masajid, but less adherence in general, right, to the religion. And depicting behind every imam is a charlatan. To me, this is an unforgivable and inexcusable tactic, all in the name of what? Self-promotion. I find it humorous that when they had the altercation in Texas, the next morning he said, look, you can see the uncut 4K version. What does it matter if the video was shot in 4K, 1080p, 720, what does it matter what resolution the video was shot in if your criticism is legitimate? And any of us can make a mistake. If your criticism is legitimate, then it really shouldn't matter whether or not you can watch it in 4K. And I think that's very highlighting of, well, what is all this about? It's a kind of grandstanding and a need to be watched, and also an attitude that takes a scorched earth policy with anything. You take, whether it's Omar Suleiman, Imam Suhaib, Sheikh Joe, anybody else, you take people that have dedicated, in some ways, probably almost more years of their lives, and particularly with, Sheikh Joe and Imam Suhaib, who are around my age, like we're in our 50s now, that have taken almost as much time to go and study Islam as some of these people have been alive. And to throw them away as if they are disposable because they did something that you disagree with, or even if they did something that's a legitimate mistake, to throw them away is, to me, a not only inexcusable attitude, but it's also very dangerous. And so we see that increasingly now in our community. If a person is a Maliki and another person is a Hanafi, they don't even want to pray with each other. Or if a person recites in Hafs and somebody else recites in Warsh or Qalun, they don't want to pray together. If a person is a follower of this or that group, and this isn't to say that there are not limitations to difference. Obviously, as we would say, the Quran, right, is qat'i thubut, right? The Quran is a immutable document, and in general, its meanings are clear and straightforward. And so obviously there can be limitations to difference, and there's also rules to difference. That being said, simply having a difference, or even if somebody is legitimately wrong, that is not the default position to take, which is to, just roast people publicly. And so I'm very concerned about what this means as an attitude for our community going forward. My impression of Daniel is that this is a person that doesn't seem to get much joy from their Islam. That Islam is not a means to paradise. Islam is not a means to living a meaningful life, but rather Islam is this binary, right? It's a 1 or a 0. Either you're doing it right or you're doing it wrong. And if you're doing it right, I don't know, there doesn't seem to be any prize that you get. And it doesn't seem to, you don't get photographed or shot in 4K. And if you're doing it wrong, well, then that's it. Even though we know that all of us will make mistakes and even blameworthy sins from time to time. And so I would highly caution against taking your Islam from a person that transacts in what I call, we've moved from, and I was thinking of this a few minutes ago, right? We've gone from referring to Muslims as being practicing to now being performative. And I think that this is absolutely the case when it comes to the Imma, right? When it comes to the Imama, when it comes to being Imam, one must now perform Islam in front of the public in such a way, not that it is according to the Book of Allah, not such that it's according to the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and those things, but it's that it is no longer, if it's not in accordance to how they judge, like a person at an art gallery or a person performing something in the Olympics, and now you must perform this Islam in front of them, and if it doesn't meet their expectations, then you're not real. So myself, I've been, what kind of imam is this that's posing with his shirt off? Well, number one, I'm not posing entirely with my shirt off. I made a number of videos promoting being physically fit, because I'm sorry, I look around at our ummah, particularly in the West, with Western diet and Western modes of living, and I see people who are very sick, myself one of them, that struggled with my health. And I saw people that as they got into their fourth and their fifth decades feeling very hopeless, that they could not make a change. And so, alhamdulillah, I was blessed to make some breakthroughs in my health. And so I created a little thing that I started doing of, fit at 50. And so to show people like, hey, if you just go, you look at pictures of me from just like a year or two ago, or I guess, maybe two or 3 years ago, I was much heavier. I was really struggling with my diabetes and all those things. And alhamdulillah, within like 9-12 month period of time, I was able to make an enormous breakthrough. And so in doing so, yes, I posed some pictures to show like, hey, I went from being this kind of like, chubby, biryani belly imam to like, hey, I got muscles again. And that's great, especially as a man, like wanting to encourage Muslim men to embrace, I guess for lack of a better idea, a more traditional mode of being masculine, being strong again, being fit again, being healthy again. And so in some of my promotional pictures that I put out, yes, I'm wearing a tank top, and I'm posing with that. And there's another picture where I was posing, but my awra is covered. And this is what I'm coming to, is that we have a thing called Sharia. And the Sharia is the demarcation line to determine whether a thing is good or bad, right or wrong, blameworthy or not blameworthy. And so if a man has his awra covered, and we know the awra, or what is considered the nakedness of a man, is not the nakedness of a woman. And so if I'm covered from the navel to the knee, I am considered to be shar'an, right? I'm considered to be covered in terms of the sharia of what Allah has made permissible, impermissible, what would be blameworthy or not blameworthy. And so if I have a picture that I am putting there to show people like, look, following this plan, right? Doing these types of exercises, following this diet plan, and on and on and on, you can make this transformation. Now, let's say, you know what? I don't like that. I don't like this guy with his pictures and he's flexing his muscles. Okay, fine. You don't have to like it. You are entitled to not like it. What you are not entitled to do is saying that there is something sinful about it. And that's the issue of the like of the social media maven that wants to come along and portray people that, hey, so-and-so is doing something, not only that is, something clear, like if it were against the religion, like they're having a ham sandwich or they're drinking a glass of wine, but just they're doing something that I don't like. They're not meeting my aesthetic for the performance of Islam, particularly as an imam. And so I'm going to give you a 1 instead of a 10, or I'm going to give you a 2 instead of an 8. And so this has fostered, in my opinion, now a very unhealthy relationship between the between imams, and between their constituency, where if you don't do something that they now deem to be right or wrong or beautiful or ugly or good or bad, then now somehow you are remiss and you are deficient in your Islam. And I'm sorry, but I simply will not play those reindeer games. I'm also really not moved or fazed whatsoever by people who will say, oh my gosh, how could you refer to Daniel using that kind of language? Okay, well, where was your outrage when he was slandering people, lying about people? I mean, you just take what he said about Omar Suleiman, and we can make criticisms of certain actions or things that Imam Omar has participated in, of which I know him. He would welcome the criticism. He would take it. He's a very, mashallah, he is a very humble person. But instead of saying, well, you know what, maybe participating in some kind of weird moment or ritual in which it looks like you're like pouring some kind of liquid on the ground for your dead homies or something, it's not a good look, right? That would be a fair criticism. But to now go and say that he supports same-sex marriage, he supports same-sex acts, when Imam Omar has come out and publicly said on YouTube, you can go find it, I do not support LGBTQ, homosexuality is a moral and grave sin, and on and on and on. And so when those things are not sufficient, meaning that I accept the morality of Islam, I accept the ahkam, I accept the moral injunctions of the Quran, and I accept the moral injunctions of the Sunnah, but because I have not expressed them or articulated them in a way that appeases your ego, that now I am somehow remiss in my Islam, I find that kind of outrage unconvincing. And so I said what I said because I have really absolutely had it up to here with this kind of juvenile, reckless attitude. And this has got to, I think of more than anything now, and this is why I want to ultimately not have this be really about Daniel, and that is, I think it's high time for imams and scholars in America. We are going to have our differences. Some of us are going to belong to this madhab and this minhaj and this tariqah and on and on. And again, I'm not saying that there is an infinite space of difference. There will be some differences where, no, that just, can't rock it, right? But outside of that, there is a significant space for us to have our differences and unite, because personally, the likes of Daniel are merely filling a vacuum. And part of that vacuum is created by our inability, as actually my friend Imam Suhaib one time coined, he said, it's like we're Chinese fighting fish. We have a very hard time cooperating and getting along, that for far too long, I think we all kind of, retreated to our own little fiefdoms of the Muslim Ummah or of the internet or whatever. And quietly, while we were all, doing that, these other personalities have been able to emerge, and through the advent of, social media, now it's left us running as if we now must come before the tribunal of Daniel Haqiqaju, and we have to now justify our positions and our existence before him, before somebody that does not have the requisite knowledge to hold people into account for. I mean, that would be the role of a qadi, of which he is obviously, that is not something he is capable of doing. So I'm just going to leave this here for some consideration. I'm not apologizing for what I said. I stand by what I said, in that he's in sore need of being taught a lesson. He's in sore need, and unfortunately, nobody seems to be able to talk to him. That's the other thing. It can be hard when you're in a position of leadership and you make a mistake, and to have to go and account for something, right? That's very difficult, because there's no way that you can be a leader and not have some ego in there somewhere, even though we know about the hadith of kibr and its implication for our salvation in the hereafter. But it's hard. But when you find a person that they themselves have no channel of which they can be counseled to not even just stop what they're doing, but just simply to attenuate what they do, then this person is not working for the benefit of the Muslims or for the pleasure of Allah, but rather I think they're playing on some other kind of demonic, they're playing on somebody else's team. So I'll leave it with this for your consideration, and may Allah make this a learning lesson for all of us in the community, and may Allah Ta'ala raise us in rank so that we can, inshallah, overcome these challenges and these insecurities for His sake, and so that we can live fruitful and meaningful lives as Muslims for the short time that we are here. وصلوات الله تعالى على النبي الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم.